Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation session of the Mental Health Morsels. One thing we all have in common is difficult people around us. Lots has been said about difficult people and dealing with them. Most of us have tried, and most of us have failed. The difficult people continue to reign and ruin. With the mental health awareness and advocacy movement going around with appreciable speed and shape globally, these difficult people continue to prove their might by acting loyal barriers to people and keeping them away from attaining their mental peace goals. There is always a way to gaslight and say that some people do invite trouble for themselves from these difficult people due to their own foolish manifestations and actions. But today's talk is not to turn the tables the other way around and not to trivialize it. It is very much about difficult people who do exist in real and are objectively difficult. If we leave the floor open and ask people as to who the difficult people in their lives are, I am sure that the characteristics are going to run into pages. Because each one of us is sharing our life story with at least one difficult person around us who's making our life pretty much miserable and not according to the ways we liked it to be. But only for the sake of convenience today, let us collate some characteristics that we see and hear while we go on building our life blocks. Difficult people could be the ones who manipulate, who gaslight, who abuse, are full of themselves. They never believe that they can be wrong. They have tremendous difficulty accepting their own mistakes. They are overly hungry for praises and appreciation. They cannot stand being sidelined, cannot share a spotlight since they always feel it has to be just theirs. They cannot stand others' talent or intellect. They love ridiculing and demeaning others, gossiping and backbiting. They lack humility, they lack politeness, they lack empathy, there's low compassion, or sometimes they are absolute experts in faking these characteristics. They will most likely have an opinion absolutely opposite to yours. They lie, and they have a unique ability to make you feel like a fool of the first order. In short, they will break, but they will not bend. I think most of the times this is quite a temperamental issue. It is so much in them that they just don't get it that they are difficult. And sometimes that's the reason we find it so difficult to make these people understand. The reason being the way they make sense of the surroundings is very peculiar. And in a more nuanced way, if we look at it closely, it is kind of a show of power done consciously or unconsciously, most of the times in less direct and a more subtle way. It's a show of power which I think grows out of their own insecurities and which are deep down, and they have a gripping fear to look foolish and to fail. I think it takes a lot of courage to expose one's vulnerabilities, and difficult people certainly lack it. On a lighter note, in this sense, because it is so difficult for them to act rationally and with empathy, I think that's why they are called difficult people. But jokes apart, and let me not trivialize it, let me get to the point again. Difficult people are here to stay, and there are no two ways about it. May it be home, work, or leisure, they make their presence felt. And it sounds so draining already to fight something that is so omnipresent. But look, if sanity has to prevail in this civilization of ours, we have to sustain and we have to fight it back. It is something that you cannot easily disown or erase, and hence working around the situation to make it work for your own advantage, I think is the best survival tactic and a strategy that we all could ever have for ourselves. I know it's a forced choice, but we better act on it strategically. I think the first step is to identify the list of difficult people around you. Well, now ideally, there should not be too many people on your list, because if there are too many, it shouldn't be the case that you yourself are being so difficult that you can't get along with so many people. So ideally, you should have a short list with maybe a person or two, and otherwise you see yourself very adaptable with most others at home and at work. Now that you have identified that most difficult person or maybe a two around you, arrange them in the order of most difficult to least difficult. Now that you have arranged this as well, make an attempt to try to give them some sense of perspective. Bad idea. Most likely you will fail. If you have tried and failed at this, just skip this step of giving a perspective, because most likely it might not work. But in case you are that one courageous soul who believes in resilience and grit way too much, stay at it. Maybe it's your choice, and we hope that you succeed someday. But for your information, defining your own space to include better temperament people in it is also, by the way, called resilience and grit. So you choose now what kind of resilience and grit you want in your own life. Now that you have shifted your life focus from theirs to yours, and please remember, when you shift your life focus on yourself, it many a times is a self-preserving response and not a selfish one. So please avoid getting on a guilt trip if you do that. First and foremost, stay away from the usual reactions you may be giving so far. Otherwise, it will trigger a habitual pattern. You cannot think of a different way to react in case. Just stay calm and buy time. Think and then respond if need be, because your no response or a different response mode can certainly puzzle them and possibly make them even fierce. But you remember to stay calm. Don't lose your focus and don't lose your strength. Remember, different outcomes need different inputs. It might be a good idea to sometimes pre-plan the conversations ahead whenever and wherever you can. It also helps sometimes to diffuse them by actually hearing them out and their point of view. Sometimes they may actually have a point and a better perspective that is helpful to you, and you don't want to miss it. So don't brush it away judgmentally. Don't get swayed, however, by this stance, because you listening to them very nicely may again be misinterpreted as you falling for the old ways of being manipulated. So be very vigilant when you do that. Most importantly, work on your own identity, your own personality, your own life goals, your own achievements, harder, finer. Difficult people, remember, we spoke of them as being weaklings from within to a large extent, and generally don't mess around with truly powerful people who believe in themselves. Sometimes just act indifferent to the manipulations. A show of your actions, don't ruffle me anymore, is quite a strong message to give them at times. Avoid unconsciously learning from them. Now, this is important because sometimes we start to observe them and we internalize those behaviors unconsciously, and we start to become difficult ourselves, and we may be tempted to behave in that way because when somebody is acting difficult, it's so easy to get things done, and out of that convenience and that profitable stance, we might also start getting swayed towards it or being tempted to be like that. But remember, you don't want to grow up into insecure and faulty human beings from within, so it's better not to take respite in it. So long story short, difficult people are omnipresent. Equip yourself by being more rational, empathetic, resilient, wise, and vigilant. I hope this tutorial helps. Practice these ways until you build a new pattern of response and outcome around these difficult people. I wish you all the best, and do leave some comments in the comment box. All the best.